Bethany Seeger. I work as a software engineer at Johns Hopkins University, and we are working on an Islandora 8 install. And a while back at a tech meeting, I showed some stuff I was working on with access controls using Drupal Workbench, and I wanted to do a more in-depth look at it and probably hopefully a bit more organized than last time, because it was just kind of a rough, it was really just a very quickly put together demonstration for folks of this new thing that I was looking at. I will also, in talking about access controls, I'm going to talk about the roles and stuff set up around them, so you can really get a feel of how we're doing access controls, more than just applying, more than just creating content groups. I should back up and say, with access controls, what I mean with what we're doing is we're making groups of content and we're assigning users to those groups so that you can thereby limit who can access what content in your system. There is an unfortunate naming collision with Drupal Workbench and Islandora Workbench. So this is not about Islandora Workbench. While I might talk about ingest, this really has nothing to do with ingest overall. So those are two very different things. I'm also open to questions during this, or we can have them afterwards. Okay, so a brief overview of what I'm going to talk about. I'll talk about our use case at Johns Hopkins. I'll talk about an overview of Workbench, where it manages workflow, access controls, talk about some other modules that I brought in to help with this. Okay, and I will go through some pros and cons that I can think of, and then do a live demo. We'll see how that goes, of some access controls. So this is what our website is starting to look like, this picture here. We're still actively developing it. Hopefully by mid-September, we'll have most of the features complete and something live hopefully soon after that. So our use space is we're moving objects from DSpace into a new Islandora 8 system. So we don't have the host of problems that folks going from Islandora 7 to Islandora 8 have to deal with. We're going to move our objects into Islandora using CSV migrations with Migrate Plus and Migrate Source UI. And these are some of the requirements that we have for roles. So we need a content editor role where you can confine the user's access to collections or certain collections. And they need to have the ability to ingest and update repository items in those collections. And we need to have an administrator role that basically has access to all content across the system. And they do not have access to configuration stuff. So that looks more like, these are the three roles that we've come up with for our system, where we have a collection level administrator. So this is, like I said, this is a person who can edit and update things within a certain specified collection or set of collections. They can add and edit items to it. They can update the collection item itself. They can add and edit taxonomy terms and perform batch updates and ingests. For the most part, they can't delete anything and they can't create new collection items. Our global administrator is a user who can touch pretty much all the content in the system and manage all the content, so collections and repository items. And they create and manage collection level administrators. And then we have the system administrator, which is basically your Drupal admin as it exists now when you log in for the first time. It's someone who can do everything. Like in our case, I imagine the system administrator is going to be a developer, or it's going to be someone from our DevOps group. And when something, a field or whatnot needs to change, they'll be contacted to do that work. So jumping into the modules that we use to solve, to basically create these users and this content access, these are the modules that I pulled in to help to do that work. I looked around and I noticed this Drupal Workbench access, which is what I was really interested in. In order to use that, I needed to have Drupal Workbench. So these modules, I think Drupal Workbench Access as a submodule or as an add-on. So I brought in both of these modules. What Drupal Workbench does, as it says here, is it simplifies the user experience for content admins. It's a pretty nice setup with that, so that your content admins don't have to learn Drupal. They don't have to learn all the menus and moving around and whatnot. They can just come in, see the content in management. And I'll show you that a little bit later. The Workbench Access is the place where these controls happen. What Drupal Workbench does is it takes Islandora permissions or Drupal permissions that you set, and it puts this other layer on top of them to refine them. So if you give edit access to nodes to an admin, then you can use Drupal Workbench Access to make finer grained buckets of access within that. Some other modules that were involved, and these just help sort of round out the experience, is role hierarchy. So this adds the ability to make a role, put roles in a hierarchy, which is pretty handy when it comes to who you let assign roles. We wanted to make sure that if we let our global admin assign users, that they can't, or create users, that they can't create a super user, or they can't escalate permissions in any ways. So this helps with that, make these, to tell the system sort of the ordering of these. I also used role delegation. And what that allows is for someone to delegate the ability to assign a user to a role. This makes it so I can give a global admin the ability to assign a role to a user, but the global admin cannot actually modify the role or the permissions within the role. So this is just basically sort of putting a little gate around that and giving them some rights, but not all user management rights. And the admin toolbar links access filter is just a handy filter that trims out anything in the admin menus that you don't have access to. So that's more like cleaning things up a little bit. And the nice part about it is it's already in Isle. I don't know if it's in Islandora. I think it must be. I'm not quite sure about that, because what we use Isle for our development and deployment. So it was already there, and I just enabled that. So the role delegation screen, I just wanted to show you this because I thought it was interesting. Basically, all role delegation does is add this set of permissions, and then I could come in and say, well, this global admin can assign collection level admin role and nothing else for users. So the role delegation, the role hierarchy, and that admin toolbar filter, they just help sort of smooth out things around the edges of putting this stuff together. So some of the benefits and pros that I've noticed in working with this, with the Workbench, is that it's a simplified experience for content editors. That was a side benefit that I wasn't shooting for when I was looking at this, but it was sort of a nice side effect. The configuration for this setup of access controls is more intuitive than some other options that I looked at. It's Drupal Workbench and Workbench Access. They're both modules that seem well supported by the community, which is nice. And I found that this doesn't complicate import and export in ways that using something like groups might. If import and export of your metadata is a must, like where you import and export, change things and re-import it, when you work with something like groups, you have a whole nother layer of things going on there. And I realize I'm talking about this stuff, and I have a feeling that a lot of people haven't quite seen groups or these types of access controls before. So maybe I'll revisit this after I demo for you what it looks like. And some of the downsides in working with this, I don't know how it scales. I guess we're gonna have to find out. The scaling part that concerns me is the way that this is set up to function is you get an access control sort of tag on every object in your system. So our goal is to have these on nodes and media. So each node and each media knows what its access control is, and it carries it with them. I know that Seth Shaw did a presentation at one point where he talked about permissions by term, which is a very similar setup. And that I think he said it didn't scale well. So it makes me wonder with this setup how it's going to scale. With the way the taxonomy is set up, I'm not sure how global admin actually use it. And I think I'm going to come back to this slide after I show you the demo because it might make more sense then. The Workbench access configuration works a little bit like this. Well, not a little bit, it works like this. What you supply once you install Workbench access is you have to designate a taxonomy like Islandora access terms, which you get with Islandora. And right now it doesn't do anything. So I'm making it do something. And you also need to create fields on your entity types that you want to have access control. So these fields are your access controls. So you'll go into a node like your repository item and you'll create a field on it, like access terms is what we call ours, and you'll link it to this taxonomy. So you have this sort of underlying setup of the taxonomy and fields that use it. Then you go into configure Workbench to create an access schema and you point it at that taxonomy. And what Workbench is going to do is it's going to look for those fields that you've created, bring them all to one place and ask you which ones you want it to act upon. And once you do that, Workbench is going to take your taxonomy and put it into what it calls sections, which are basically groups of content. It calls them editorial sections, I believe. And if you think of your site as having sections of editorial content, it kind of helps in thinking about this. And now you're ready to configure access controls by associating a user with a role with a certain section. I feel like I might be putting the cart before the horse, but I think when I show you the demo, it'll make a lot more sense. And I wasn't sure which order to do this in, to talk about configuration and then demo, or demo and then talk about configuration. So hopefully in a few minutes, this will make a lot more sense. In terms of roles, the orange squares, this taxonomy one, go back, and this orange square down here, those are within the global admin's control. So it's our intention that once we have our like our digital content manager in the system, they're going to create these groupings of data and they're going to be assigning users to these specific groupings. The gray boxes are stuff that are handled by the systems folks behind the scenes. So I fully expect the taxonomy is going to change over time and the users assigned to sections are going to change over time. So I want to jump into the demo, and I wanted to give a little background of what's in there already, because hopefully this won't be hard to follow, but this is the content setup I have. And I have these collections. So library collection, which has an archives and special collections subcollection, which has these two collections, archives, special collections. So I made this all up and split it all out in maybe a hypothetical scenario. Special collections has a maps and atlases collection within it. Then we have this photography collection, and then we have this biology collections that has a biomedical engineering collection. So the way our DSpace instance has been used over time is we give access to other groups across the university to creating what DSpace calls communities. So you can create a community and then folks can come in and manage what's in that community. So when I was setting up this data, I was thinking about communities. So maybe we have our library community or library collections. We have someone who came in and said they really want a photography collection or community. And maybe the biology department came and said, we really want to put some of our collections in your system. So that's why I set this up this way. And so I have these collections, and what you'll see mirrored in that, the taxonomy for access sort of mirrors this. So I'm going to break out of here. This is where I have to pull up way too many screens. I'll try to do this. Okay. So I have, I'm going to log in as a system admin. to start with. And just give you a little bit of a walkthrough there. So the first thing that you might notice at the top, I'll make this a little bit bigger, is this Workbench upper menu here. And when I click on it, I get these submenus. So this is that simplified workflow. And granted, I'm an admin, so I probably don't need it, but it's still nice here and it's still available to me as an admin. And it provides me with my Workbench, which is going to take me to a page. It's chugging away. That's going to show me information about my most recent edits or recent content changes. So this looks very much like what you might find on the content page. A note about our system is we have repository items and we have collection items. We have separated those, but that's just a side thing. But in case you see it, it just means we have two nodes that we're managing. We thought it might be easier in the long run. I guess time will tell if it makes sense to have split them up. On my Workbench menu, I can create content from here. I'm an admin. I can create any of these things. Article and basic page are not going to be available to a global admin or a collection level admin. And you'll see that they're not. So we haven't taken them out, and they're also not exposed. I have a thing here that will show me what I've edited specifically. And because I'm admin, I did all the ingests of this data. So it all shows up for me. All recent content, so anything anybody's touched. And then it gives me a tab where I can configure these other 4 tabs. And these configurations are views. So if you do want to update something and do something slightly different, you do have the option to change it. So, but you still have all the regular system menus available to you as well. So I, as an admin, when I log in, I just still use the content menu and structure and whatnot, mostly because Workbench only really handles the content stuff. And I don't need to do that as an admin. So it's all still there for your admin user. And I mentioned that Workbench is driven by a taxonomy. So I've repurposed Islandora Access, or maybe I've purposed it. I don't know if you want to say repurposed. And inside of that, I've created a bunch of terms. And so these terms mimic the collection that I showed earlier. Let's see if I still have that up. They don't have to. It really doesn't have to mimic it. It's completely arbitrary what you put in this vocabulary and how you apply it. But I had it mostly mirror it. So I have my library collection, and I have my library community, which I called library collections. And I have all the sort of breakout points that I wanted, or how I wanted to split it up. I also have this photography one, biology department, and I have this one too. This is a department I'm in, and that's just totally a test category. I don't even use it right now. And so you'll see that these sort of mirror each other, but they don't have to. I've just found in my brain it's sort of easiest if they do align a little bit. And you can see that these are hierarchical over here, which means that what I'm going to do eventually is I'm going to assign admins to these divisions of content groups, or these content groups. So if I were to put an admin in this content group, they have read-write access to everything down up to here. So this whole thing could be managed by that user. Or I could be more specific and put a user just into one of these subgroups here, like archives. And then all they can manage is just the stuff within the archive content group. And the same with biology. So if we have people across the university coming in to edit this biology stuff, we can limit them to either this, which includes both of them, or just this. And it also means they won't be able to touch anything else down here. So that's the first part, is setting up this vocabulary with these access terms. The second part is going to Islandora workflow access and creating that schema that I talked about. Bring this up. So now I'm going to go, well, I should say, let me show you the second part. really is going to the content types and managing their fields and adding something in there like access terms. And this access term references that vocabulary. So I have a couple of these. I have it on collection object, repository object, and all my media types. And then you go over to your workflow workbench access. I created something I called communities earlier. So you create one access scheme. And in that access scheme, you point it to the taxonomy. Now note here, you can have multiple taxonomies. I haven't played with that. That could be fairly interesting if you can think of a paradigm of how you might want to split up your access terms. And then down here, it picked up where all these fields were. So they're all in my media types. They're all in my two content types. And I get to pick which ones I want to do access controls over. So that's how you create the infrastructure for access controls here with this. Once that's done and you've saved it, now you can come in and look at the sections. And so these, now we're going to look at these sections based on this taxonomy over here. And you can see what it did is it brought in those taxonomy terms, and it created that hierarchy here as well. And it does these things with these hyphens to indicate the hierarchy there. So now basically I'm ready to put users into access groups. And I will say that I have already in my content added this access information. So if I go to my library collection and I edit it, I have set my access terms. So this one is part of the library collection. So any user who has access to manage library collections can touch this object. And I want to come back here. I want to look at the map collection. So I have this maps and atlases. And inside of it, I have map A and map B as repository items. And you can see that mirrored here. Here's maps and atlases, which is part of special collections over here. And then map A and its parent is listed here as part of maps and atlases, and map B is part of maps and atlases. So if I go to map A, what I'd expect to see is that it's got its access terms set up correctly. Now, the thing is that I want to change this later, but I want to start this way. Okay, I've never changed that back. I'm going to change this here. So I had meant to change something. Now we'll go backwards. Okay, so it has its access terms of maps and collections. So in theory now, what I want to walk through is we're going to create a global admin, which I created earlier. They're pretty straightforward. You create a user and you apply the global admin role to it, and that's all you need to do for that particular user in our setup. I think I have one more screen. Okay, so I'm going to have my global admin login over here. We'll see what's there. Okay, forgot my admin's name, global admin 1. So now I'm at that user who has access to all content, but not access to all management configuration stuff. And so what their user experience looks like is they still have this workbench menu, the same one as before. And it shows similar stuff. This time it's in particular to them. So what have they edited? We can see that global admin has revised a few things. And if they go and create content, they only have access to creating collection objects and repository items. So that did filter out the stuff they don't have access to. And I can see my edits or all recent content as well. Now, I also still have the manage menu. And if you look at this, I can still get to content like I always have, but other things have been trimmed back. And this is where that admin filter toolbar came in and got rid of stuff that I don't have permissions for. A global admin can migrate material into the system and they can manage taxonomies. So they still have access to stuff here, which has been trimmed back to adding and editing. and they're able to edit this access stuff. And okay, I'm going to jump up here and I'm going to have this person is going to create the collection level admin. So you'll notice here, they don't have access to roles and they don't have access to permissions here. They can just come in and create users. And I need to create. And down here, the only role they can assign is collection level admin. So now I have this new admin. There's nothing they can do yet. And I'm going to come over here, log in as them. Okay, so they can come into the system. And as a collection level admin, here's their workbench setup. There's actually a problem here. So I'm gonna, oh, it's not gonna fix it. Okay, they can't do anything yet because I created them as a user, but I haven't put them into any groups or sections within the access control. But you can see that they can still log in, they can still see everything, and they can even view it all, but they can't edit it. So there's not much they can do here. And their menu experience, what they're capable of doing is they can migrate stuff, although I bet this admin wouldn't be able to because they have no content groups. They can edit and update taxonomies. This configuration is a fluke that I haven't figured out yet. And they can view reports. So what I need to do as the global admin is I need to go back and give them something to do. So when I was here and I created this admin, up here in this menu, you now see this workbench access here. So this is how I put this admin into a group. So I'm going to give them access to all the library's collections, meaning that they can edit anything in this hierarchy. And now that I've given them something to do, I'm going to come back here and refresh. And now when I look at Workbench, all of a sudden they have all this edit ability now because I've given them sections to work on. But you notice they can't edit everything. They can't edit stuff in the biomedical engineering collection. They can't edit stuff that is in the general biology department or this photograph item. And there's some more stuff on page 2. So they've been limited to all the library stuff. And you can further refine this. So if I switched around what this person could see and said, well, really, I want them to just update the maps analysis. Or maybe you create another user to do that. But for now, I'm just going to use the same user. Now you can see that I've just taken away things. And oh, now they can only edit maps and atlases, map A and map B. And there was some stuff in here, like if you don't turn off caching when you do this, it doesn't work quite right. So here's some stuff that can be really affected by caching being turned on. And I'm trying to see, I think I want to stop here in terms of demoing and maybe answer any questions or clarifying anything if folks have, yeah, any questions. Yeah.